Good evening, everybody, and welcome to today's meeting of the Corporate Scrutiny Committee, Monday the 19th of January. We'll begin with some apologies for absence. So we've had apologies from Councillor Coles, who's substituted by Councillor Rose, from Councillor Watson, who's substituted by Councillor Waller, and from Councillor Taylor, who is substituted by Councillor Whitcroft. So, welcome everybody. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare any interest in any of the topics on today's agenda? No. Thank you. Agenda item 3, the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of November 2025. Are members happy to accept those as an accurate record? Yeah, agreed. Thank you. Any matters arising from the minutes that members wish to discuss? Nope. Okay. Thank you. Agenda item 4, public participation. We have no registered speakers for this evening's meeting, but in the event that there are any, we've got our barriers in place to keep order, which is good to know. No topical jokes. No. So, agenda item 5. So this is the main item of business on today's agenda. The draft report of the budget and medium-term financial strategy task and finish group. So I will shortly ask Councillor Baxter, as chair of the task and finish group, to introduce the report. And for officers to add any comments that they wish. But I'd like to begin by thanking the members of the Task and Finish group and all those who supported them in their work. And thank you to Democratic Services for the presentation of the report, which I think is it's good to see and is far better presented than any Task and Finish group reports I've ever written. So that's so it's good to see that degree of polish, which I think is good. So, Councillor Baxter, can I invite you to present the report?
Thank you, Chair. So, as you mentioned, this is a draft report of the Budget and Medium-Term Financial Strategy Task and Finish Group, which I thoroughly enjoyed chairing over a few months. As you said, I'd also like to thank the members of the Task and Finish group, so Councillor Eyre, Councillor Moroney and Councillor Hook, and all the officers who helped. So Jane, James, Debbie and Patrick, really appreciate it. And of course, Councillor Lomas too for her engagement. So the group was asked by this committee to look at how the council develops and scrutinises its budget and medium-term financial strategy and the particular content that CYC as a council faces, so looking at adult social care. And I particularly wanted to chair this group because I think it's increasingly important that residents feel listened to by the council in the budget setting process. I'm sure we've seen lots of stuff swirling online about misinformation about how council money is spent. And I think councillors are just one of those means for residents to feel like they're heard by the council, and also making sure that the council in its comms that goes out to the public is very clear about that. So yeah, I hope everyone's enjoyed reading the report, and particularly the layout of it. I thought it was fantastic, so especially thanks to Dem Services for working on that, because I think it's very clearly set out, and yeah, thank you to everyone who has been involved in it.
Okay. So our task this evening is to discuss the draft report and the recommendations with a view to approving the document to go forward to executive, where they will be invited to approve those recommendations. So what I propose to do is to go through, starting on page 23, which is the main report, to to go through recommendation by recommendation and ask members if they have any any comments they wish to make. In the event that there are any proposals to amend any of the wording, then we can pause and discuss that. But I'm conscious that this is a product of a significant amount of work that the Task and Finish group have done. So I think it's fair to say wholesale rewrite at this meeting is not what we're about. So we don't want to undo the work that has been done by this cross-party group. So the report sets out the remit of the Task and Finish group. It sets out the reason for the prioritisation. Some aspects of the initial aims and objectives have not been taken forward, but there was an agreement to prioritise on a smaller subset, which is understandable in terms of wanting to bring back to this committee some robust and realistic recommendations. So the background explains how that was arrived at. Then on page 30 we have the first recommendation and accompanying narrative. And the first recommendation from the Task and Finish group is that it should continue to exist. Be re-established for the start of the next municipal year with a continued focus on the medium-term financial strategy, the budget setting process and the form that scrutiny of these should take. Members wish to make any comments on that recommendation? No, I will take take that as agreement to that recommendation. Recommendation 2 is for the re-established Task and Finish group to review the format of budget and budget monitoring reports with a view to ensuring greater accessibility and a sufficient level of detail to understand the impacts of decisions taken on the budget. Are members content with that? The only question I had, I suppose to help me better understand what this would encompass, budget monitoring reports, will that include monitoring the delivery of budget savings? Is that something that was discussed as part of that? I don't know whether Councillor Baxter or Councillor Lomas, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it absolutely should, in the monitor reports that we receive and that come through, they absolutely should look at delivery of savings, because they're a really crucial, important part of us keeping on track with our budget every year.
Okay. No, I'd kind of presumed that it would be covered by that. I just wanted to be sure I'd correctly understood it. Councillor Baxter?
I suppose we could put in budget monitoring, which includes how savings are being delivered, to make it more explicit. People would be happy with that.
If people would be happy with that, that would help. Thank you. Councillor Waller?
Thank you, Chair. I think the question that I'm going to raise relates to a number of recommendations, and I can understand why there was an emphasis on the adult social care budget due to its proportion of the total council spend. Nationally, there has been a significant discussion amongst all councils in the LGA with regards to SEND spending and commitments by the government. And certainly as we're approaching the end of the safety valve formula, there is this significant spend in that area, and I'd like to see that included in any future work because of the scale of that in terms of the children's education budget.
Okay. Is that something that the Task and Finish group considered in terms of, obviously, you've identified the adult social care budget for understandable reasons. Was there a discussion about other aspects of council spend?
Yeah, I suppose we focused on adult social care because, as Patrick pointed out a couple of times, that we could sort everything else out in that 40%, but if we still have that 60% sort of not under control, which adult social care then would still be not in a great financial position. And I think we chose to focus on adult social care just because if we then add in another, we'll end up adding another area of kind of budget spend, I think. It was sort of the consensus of the group.
Yeah, okay. Debbie?
I was just going to add that we didn't talk specifically about SEND, but obviously it is a big issue. It's not a massive issue for us at the moment because of the safety valve programme. I think we just need to await the white paper to understand how the government is going to deal with those costs, because they have talked about them remaining national, haven't they? But I don't think any of us really believe that that's how it's going to work. So it's definitely something we'd like to keep an eye on. I don't think we quite know enough about what the government's plans are at this stage to understand whether a task and finish group would be the best way to look at that, or whether it might be so it might be something that you might come back to when we've got the white paper and we understand a bit more about future funding arrangements, potentially.
Yeah. So I suppose the task and finish group, the reformed task and finish group, could sort of keep an eye on that, and it may be something that people scrutiny might want to pick up in the course of sort of the council's response to government proposals. Councillor Widdowson?
I know why it's been focused on the adult social care, which I've got no issues on, but I'm assuming it would get broader over time. If you're going to keep looking at the various different parts of the budget, once 60% of it has been thoroughly looked at and you're looking for the savings which are going to come back, then you would spread that out. From what was written, I'm guessing that is the future direction, for want of a better phrase.
So my reading of it is there are two distinct proposals. There's a proposal for a joint piece of work by corporate scrutiny and people scrutiny in relation specifically to the adult social care budget. The ongoing work of the task and finish group will obviously look at all other areas of the budget. So it's not as though they won't be looked at. Part of the overall monitoring envisaged in recommendation 2 would make sure that other areas looked at. Is that right?
Yeah, if we just skipping ahead a little bit on recommendation 4, you'll see that one of the recommendations is to establish a separate task and finish group just for adult social care, and then of course we can spend more time on other things. Yeah.
That's my error, I just read it then.
That's fine. Any further comments on that? Recommendation 2, Councillor Eyre?
I think just a reflection on that, I think one of the issues around adult social care is it's so complicated, and the budget is there to actually, the level of scrutiny that you need to do on parking income, for example, is relatively straightforward. You have a forecast income on parking, you can check that every month, you know whether you're on track or not. Some of the issues around adult social care are far, far more complicated than that, and the number of placements, etc. So it's much harder and much more involved work in terms of doing that. So that's probably why there's a little bit more of a focus on that one. And also, some of those individual budget lines, when you break adult social care down, are bigger than entire budgets elsewhere in the council. So a £5 million budget over here is very within adult social care, so it does need a little bit more scrutiny.
Okay. Councillor Lomas?
Thank you. Completely agree. I also think it's really important to not duplicate work, and that's why the recommendation at recommendation 4 is a joint work between the corporate scrutiny, budget task and finish group and people scrutiny group, because we fully expect people scrutiny to have a particular interest in what's happening in adult social care over the next year, and it makes sense to work with them, because obviously whatever is happening to achieve change in adult social care will affect both their spend and their service delivery, and it's important to work together on that. And I think it's a really good example of how the new scrutiny arrangements can work really well, avoiding duplication, avoiding things being discussed in detail at committee after committee after committee, but actually bringing people together and working together cross-committee on a piece of work that's very much of shared interest.
Thank you. Councillor Rose, is this on recommendation 4 or are we still on
recommendation 2 still?
Okay, thank you.
But it was just a very, very small one, which is there's references to the Treasury management in terms of training in this document, but I just wanted for clarity to confirm that the Treasury management reports isn't part of recommendation 2. We're talking budget only. Is that correct?
That's, my understanding.
Yeah, we were thinking just the main budget reports. We focused on revenue, but we would want to look at capital as well. But we would stick Treasury still within audit and governance for scrutiny rather than bringing it somewhere else.
I mean, Treasury management reports probably a little bit more accessibility, but it felt outside of the remit, so I just wanted to confirm that.
Great, thank you. Moving on to page 32, recommendation 3. So this is a recommendation to executive that the budget setting process commence earlier in the municipal year to enable proposed savings to be shared sooner with elected members and the task and finish group, allowing for greater engagement and more in-depth scrutiny of the proposals to better inform recommendations to executive. It is a very long sentence, but it says a lot. Are there any comments or questions about this? Councillor Rose.
And by the way, I also think it's a great report and it's well presented, so thanks for that. I forgot to mention that before, but recommendation 3, I mean, fully support it. The only thing that was a challenge this year, the timings around when we get announcements of settlement numbers, and this obviously calls out the fact that we've got a bit more knowledge ahead of time, but I just wanted to get a bit of clarity on to what extent that might change when we get to December this year. Are we confident in what 27, 28 numbers look like, or is there subject to change still?
Yeah, well, the government have announced a 3-year settlement, so the figures that they've published, subject to the final settlement, which we're expecting in the next couple of weeks, should be fixed, but politicians at national level have in the past changed their mind. But it's something to work for, and we can work on, and it is really planning for the worst, because they're not great figures, as I'm sure you've seen, in terms of the savings that we're going to have to make over the next couple of years. So the earlier we can work across all political parties and across all areas of the council, the better to some extent. So we would certainly welcome that and would work with any task and finish group to assist with that.
Yeah, thanks for that. I wasn't sure if it was definite for this year and the next year's 5% flex or some other thing, but yeah, noted on the point around national decision making.
Yes, with that question I was going to ask in terms of, is the kind of would the landscape of announcements and certainty support that approach? But obviously, in the course of your discussion, you've been assured it's possible. Therefore, it appears in here. So that's good to know. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. I just think, on my reflection, multi-year settlements, while it sounds fantastic, I don't think it's the be-all and end-all. It doesn't change massive amounts when we've had the 1-year settlements, etc. For example, the medium-term financial strategy shows £12 million needed the year after. Yes, that might change even under multi-year settlement. We knew it was £10 million a year ago. The change from what we were talking about in the 26-27 budget 6 months ago to what it is now is very, very minimal. So there wasn't waiting for such an announcement doesn't really make a difference. You plan for 10 million. If it comes out 10.5, you have to find another $500,000. If it comes in at 9 million, then fantastic. That's £1 million you don't have to do. But I don't think actually waiting to settlement makes that much difference. The earlier we can get on with the process, we have a massive challenge in 27, 28, 28, 29. I think the government settlement is the worst possible thing that's ever happened to the city in many ways. And the sooner we plan about that and have those serious conversations, I think the better.
Any other comments about recommendation 3? No. So recommendation 4, which we've already touched on, relates to a standing joint task and finish group between this committee and people to review financial challenges within adult social care on a regular basis. In terms of, well, I suppose the first question is, are members content for us to make that request to the people Scrutiny Committee, that this task and finish group is established. Okay, that's good. Are people happy with the wording of the recommendation as it stands? Councillor Whitcroft?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, very happy with the recommendation, the wording. I just think, I'm sure it will be the case, but it's always good to make sure that we check. In terms of the engagement that would happen between these two groups, obviously adult social care is a huge part of the budget, to make sure that engagement there is with the task and finish group that we've got. From this committee as well, if there was, I'm not sure what scope there would be there for having those joint meetings together, or whether there'll be shared members or shared chairs or something. I mean, it's something to think about in terms of the construction, but obviously these two committees, or task and finish groups rather, are going to have very similar mandates. There'll be a lot of crossover, something just to factor in and be aware of.
Yes, I think we would, assuming that People Scrutiny is content, we would look to field a couple of members from this committee and a couple from from the People Scrutiny Committee. I think in terms of way of working for that committee, it would, the way I would see it working, they would work informally as task and finish groups do, but we then need to figure out appropriate junctures at which they would report back to both committees. But I'm sure with James and others we can sort of figure out how that would work in practice. And obviously we'd want to be kind of guided by officers in terms of how we can structure it in a way that will the whole point of having the group is to hopefully add value. So that's something that we can give a bit more thought to. Any other comments? Councillor Waller.
Just as a member of People Scrutiny, I think it'd be helpful to have this offer question more clearly defined by the time that we have the next People Scrutiny meeting, so that we know what's being asked for in terms of, if it's 2 people, fine, and there's clarity on what that will do and the time frame that's working on, and that doesn't eat into, because we're only allowed 2 at any one time. So does that breach that too? We need to know.
I'm sure
those are the genuine questions that people will raise at that scrutiny meeting.
Yeah.
What are we being asked for?
Yeah, I think obviously we're not setting the aims and objectives of that task and finish group here. So the proposal is that a joint task and finish group is established. There's then a separate conversation as to the realistic aims and objectives of that group, and in that we would want to talk to officers. So it's a legitimate question for members of the People Scrutiny Committee to want to know what they're signing up to. So maybe in time for that next meeting, we could maybe have a go at coming up with a few pointers as to what we think it would be useful and realistic for that group to do. Yeah, because you can think, well, where do you start? In terms of number of members, what we've kind of aimed for 5. Sometimes we've achieved that, sometimes we haven't, but it hasn't sort of proved particularly problematic. So we'd probably aim for 2 from one committee and 2 from another, but if there are 3 really keen people from one, that's fine. But again, we would want to try and sort of maintain political proportionality wherever possible. But the task and finish group work we've done, that hasn't really, hasn't got to the point where it, casting votes as to whether recommendations are approved or not. But obviously, if it's 4 from one group and 1 from another, but we're dependent on volunteers coming forward, so that's the sort of potentially limiting factor. But hopefully we'll be inundated with requests. Councillor Rose?
Yeah, just a tiny thing to note from memory. People Scrutiny wanted to only have 2 task and finish groups in circulation. They've got 3 on the waiting list. So just for awareness that, in my opinion, this is the most important issue in face of the council. So it's the one that's the priority. But obviously bear that in mind as well. If it then they might not say definitely yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting, and it's something we need to think about as we review the scrutiny arrangements where in place we don't have an ongoing task and finish group, but in people there's a, I say, waiting list of issues. But yeah, I'm keen that we don't sort of stymie enthusiasm where it exists to take work forward, assuming there's officer capacity to support it, obviously. Anything else on recommendation 4? No. Recommendation 5 relates to training, so we will be requesting that as part of the Joint Standards Committee's review of member training and induction, the Council looks to provide enhanced training and guidance for members on the Council's financial position, including capital and treasury management. Councillor Eyre.
Just to reflect on this as I was reading it, probably to Debbie and Patrick, that we try and make this a two-way process. As Debbie and Patrick are fantastic at presenting issues around the budget, and I've worked with them for years as Councillor Lomas, and they're very good at what they do, but I think for some members, actually getting feedback back from members about what they do and don't understand and how the presentation might be easier would be beneficial as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think that would be, you know, I suppose whenever you're delivering training or information, checking with the recipient how that's landed, but maybe as part of sort of the preparation of any training or information materials, checking in with members, maybe, you know, is this being presented in a format and in a way that makes it easy for you to understand? Sometimes it can be, sometimes you don't want to ask a question in case you think you'll look silly, but there's no such thing as a silly question. And yeah, not everybody is hot on finance, and it's.
I mean, yeah, no, I absolutely take your point, and you don't know what you don't know, and we do know it, and I'm aware that we write and talk in acronyms, and it's you forget when you're doing it all every day, day in, day out. You forget that other people don't know what you know, but. We've done a lot of training. A number of you have had to suffer through our various training courses and treasury management training at audit committee and so on. But we, you know, as I think we've said in the cover report, capacity is an issue. We are a small council, we are a small team, but a lot of this can be done sort of, half an hour before a committee, for example. If people are in, we can use the room. We can do it in bite-sized chunks a bit, and then people can go away and think about it. And often, once you've had a bit of training, you've gone away and thought about it, you do have some more questions. The more you kind of know about a subject, so we can certainly do that, and then take feedback as we go to see whether it was at too low a level, too high a level, and just keep it as an iterative process. We just. Obviously, it's just the call on finance officers' time, really. But if we can do it in those chunks, it's half an hour here, it's half an hour there. If we get the programme set up, should be okay. Yeah,
no, I think that would be helpful, because if you have 3 hours worth, you're not going to absorb all of that.
No, you're not, and it's just too much in one sitting, isn't it? So we can, like I say, I think if we try and work through, loads of other councils will have done this. We'll get some feedback from other councils. You know, certainly if you've got any contacts or any things that have worked for you, and we'll try and pull together what we think might be a suitable programme. We can always run that past Councillor Lomas as the exec member for finance as well, and see if there's anything that for example, she might think is needed or that we've missed. And then we can just give it a go and see how it works.
Yeah, sounds good.
But you probably need to sort of, because if I was, for instance, doing a presentation to Councillor Eyre or Councillor Lomas, there's a different level of understanding, base understanding, whereas if you're a new member who's just come onto the council with very little experience, it's difficult to have a presentation that would work for both.
Yeah,
those kind of members, because one would be saying this is too basic, the other saying I'm already.
By which Patrick means I need drawings.
You need drawings, okay. Well, we all learn differently, in different ways. And some people, understand, that I think the use of the pie chart is good in that you can see the proportions of total spend. Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, if we move on to recommendation 6, this relates to communication and engagement. So the recommendation is that the Council identifies ways to further develop the level of communication and engagement with stakeholders and communities on the reality of the budget situation, which includes encouraging feedback aimed at increasing responses as part of the consultation process. Any comments on that, Councillor Rose?
Only a tiny one that this year we've seen a significant sharp increase in misinformation that's deliberate. And it's something we need to be aware of when looking at recommendation 6, but I don't think that takes anything away from the wording here and what it's doing. So,
I think of social media.
Amongst other things, but predominantly.
Yeah, I suppose it's the thing with budget consultations. Obviously, they happen within a context, which is a known kind of envelope of resource. I think the years I've been a councillor, it's I think different methods have been tried in terms of what you want to ask meaningful questions where the response can have a meaningful impact, and it's kind of finding a way to do that, but in a way that doesn't raise massively unrealistic expectations, but whilst at the same time doesn't just kind of is not too preachy. I don't know what the answer is, but this recommendation doesn't specify an answer. It says think about ways in which this could be done better and differently. Councillor Lomas?
Yeah, thank you. I think as we went through the process of the Task and Finish group, we were able to use some of the discussions that we had and the suggestions that members of the Task and Finish group had to actually change how we communicated around the budget this year. And I'm sure there'll be more ideas, thoughts, suggestions that come through the Task and Finish group that can really help, because I think there are a number of different ways we need to communicate about this, and it's not just about the formal budget consultation process. It's also about how we help residents to understand how we are spending the money that they give us and the money we're allocated to spend on their behalf. So a number of things have already been put in place, and there will be more to come, I'm sure. And that includes just getting out general messaging around council finances and how it works. So I'm really grateful to all of the help that everyone gave through the Task and Finish group on that, because there were some really helpful suggestions.
Okay. Councillor Widdowson?
I'd like to echo what you said as well, Chair, that we don't know what the answer is, but there has got to be a better way. One of the things I would love to get involved is some really clear communications. I don't know if it needs from the experts or whether it's from internal, or whether it's from a different council somewhere else in the country that may have cracked this, and how we avoid leading questions. Because sometimes we already know what answer we're looking for. So by the way that we present it, unknowingly, by the way we present it, we're already funneling people to the answer we're looking for, which may not be correct. Because that isn't what we're asking. We're asking what their opinion is, not, could you please just underline, we think we've got this right already. And I think that really needs to be in that area.
Yeah, I think it is kind of picked up by the communication and engagement strategy, which came here for pre-decision scrutiny, and I think is being approved next week. In terms of the nature of consultation being meaningful and being clear with those participating, what is it shaping a sort of predetermined piece of work, or is it totally new ideas for something that's a clean sheet of paper? Yeah, 'cause people do tend to see through is to think, look at the range of questions and think, what opportunity do I really have to influence? And I think being honest, you're more likely to get sort of feedback you can act on. But I'd say that I think that's addressed to some extent in the strategy that should be agreed next week. Councillor Rose?
I mean, I agree with those. I think one of the big challenges we've had on budget for that is you've got kind of two types of consultation. The consultation of what do you want in general, and the consultation on here's a proposal. The latter is much more kind of inherently leaning. Because everything's had to be so late, it then ends up being much more of a later, we've got these proposals on the table. By moving all this stuff early, you've got the opportunity to genuinely say, what are the priorities? But that's where I'm concerned about misinformation creeping in, because if you say, did you know that swimming pools cost X amount per year? Some people will go, they're going to plan to close down those kind of things happen every year without fail anyway, but this year more deliberately. So I think the earlier we pull it and the more open we make it, the better for sure.
Yeah, I suppose it goes back to that sort of early, not having a conversation at the end of a process, but having conversations throughout, which is covered in one of the other recommendations. Any other comments on recommendation 6? Yeah, Councillor Whitcroft.
Thank you, Chair. Just one final point, because the misinformation thing I think is particularly egregious when it comes to what can only be described as AI slop online being used to basically point out complete lies that are very easily rebutted, but I think there should be an element of rebuttal strategy from a comms perspective that we could maybe look at, not just from an engagement point of view. If we are seeing consistent things being sent out that are obviously false and used in an effort to try and paint any of us or specific officers or councillors in bad light, I think there should definitely be scope within what we're doing here to try and make sure we prepare for what people might try and say to us and be prepared to rebut that effectively. I might be extending the scope slightly here.
Just a tad.
But I think I think it's worth saying.
Thank you. Councillor Eyre.
It's difficult because it's incredibly resource intensive, but nature abhors a vacuum. A lot of that is coming out and a lot of that is being listened to because there's nothing else there. So that is, at the moment, most of that space is being 99% filled with AI. Sort of slop's the right term, I don't know. I think it's kudos for trying to find something not sweary thing, but yeah. So it is actually about maintaining those conversations, and I think that kind of goes back to what Councillor Rose was saying, is there is lots we can talk about. It should never be about the specific proposals. That should come at the end of it. Things such as council tax, how much council tax do you think you should pay? Things about adult social care placement, where we place people, what type of services we provide adult social care. Those are all massively broad conversations that do feed into the decisions you make around the budget towards the end, but aren't actually budget specific. Parking being a massive thing. How many parking spaces do we have? Where should parking spaces be? Is there a limit? There's so many conversations. I think while you're having those conversations, that then becomes easier when people are posting nonsense. And some of us do waste too much of our time on social media defending against such things, but gives you the opportunity to push people and go, don't read this, go over here. This is actually a very good opportunity here. The council has got this up, loads of conversations happening, put your views into that one instead. At the moment, you're sort of saying, don't listen to this. We'll get back to you in a few months' time with something that you probably should be listening to. So, but equally appreciate that is quite resource intensive for a comms team.
Yeah, and that's it's sort of a bigger piece in terms of it's not just budget related communications, and I am aware that obviously the council was limited in what it could put out over the last few weeks because of because of election restrictions. So that probably helped create the vacuum, but for obvious reasons. Any more comments on recommendation 6? No. And recommendation 7 is to track the recommendations, which I think dovetails in well with other work that is in hand in terms of having a formal process for tracking recommendations from Scrutiny to make sure we don't lose sight of them, because we do track motions, petitions, Scrutiny recommendation. There's no reason why we shouldn't track recommendations from task and finish groups too. Hopefully that's relatively uncontroversial. Okay, so then on page 35 we've got next steps. First of which I'm very pleased to see, is an explicit reference to the Task and Finish Group's report being referred to executive, which I naively thought that's how all Task and Finish Group reports would be handled, but that my experience is that is not how it's working. So it's good to see this in, and hopefully all future Task and Finish Group reports will contain a similar instruction. With reference to recommendation 1, which we've discussed and approved, re-establishing a Task and Finish Group. Obviously, we had the 4 people on the Task and Finish Group that has just concluded. 2 were members of this committee, 2 weren't, which is absolutely fine. So, do members want to volunteer their services now, or think about it and come back later? Is it something that groups want to discuss in terms of? I'd be reluctant to nominate people who aren't here. We could just say we hereby ask the members of the current Task and Finish Group to carry on, but that would obviously be unfair because 2 of the people aren't here to have a view. How do people want to proceed? Councillor Rose?
Yeah, the intention is to set it back up at the start of the new municipal year in May, right? Just thinking the membership of the committee might have changed at that point. That might be a point to gather names.
I'm not sure we are going to wait till May. I don't think we should. Councillor Baxter?
I was just going to say I'm happy to carry on the
that's
thing.
one.
I'll volunteer myself now. I'll be first out there. But yeah, I think we were planning on sort of carrying on, not just waiting until May to set it up again.
Yes, Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, I think if people volunteer their services now, and if their committee roles change in the new municipal year and that causes a difficulty, then I'm sure nobody would be averse to swaps being made. But I'm quite keen to start working with the committee pretty much immediately to establish how we're going to do the process as we've outlined in the recommendations.
Councillor Eyre?
I mean, I'm going to work on the assumption there's a massive waiting list of people desperately trying to get onto this Task and Finish Group. So I don't want to be in any way a blocker to that. But on the off chance that there isn't such a waiting list, I would be more than happy to continue.
Okay. So can I suggest that we graciously accept the very kind offers from Councillors Baxter and Eyre if the Labour and Liberal Democrat groups can each nominate one further person. I'm happy to reach out to the Conservative group to ask if they would like to nominate a representative to join the group, so we've got a good spread of representation. Are you happy for me to do that? Okay. Okay, so so in conclusion, with I think we talked about a slight tweak to the wording in relation to monitoring recommendation, having an explicit reference to monitoring delivery of agreed budget savings. Are members content to agree the report and recommendations of the Task and Finish Group? Councillor Merritt.
Can I just come back to the next steps issue about sending these recommendations to the executive?
Mm-hmm.
Is there not an issue that actually recommendations 1, 2 and 7 are matters for this committee to decide, not for the executive?
Yes.
I'm sorry, and 4. It's recommendations 3, 5 and 6, which I think are recommendations to the executive because they are executive decisions to make.
Yes. Thank you for that helpful clarification. So we're sending we're sending the whole report to executive, but
Yes,
asking them explicitly to agree to recommendations 3, 5 and 6, which,
Yes.
for which they are the relevant decision maker. Thank you. Councillor Eyre?
I think there is an element of 2 as well, in terms of how you're presenting budget and budget report, monitoring reports.
True.
Is that it?
Okay. So, relevant recommendations.
Yes.
To go to executive. Others can decide what's relevant and what's not. Okay, and in relation to the joint task and finish group, the agreement of the People Scrutiny Committee will be sought. And again, I think we'd be looking at hopefully sort of 5 members to join that group. Again, if I can ask, well, the People Scrutiny Committee can consider that, but if I can ask members of this committee if they would want to be representatives of this committee on that group. You don't have to put your hand up now, but if members could consider that. And I'm conscious we've got a number of guests here tonight who who are not currently members of this committee. So those not here might be keen, but the sooner we can agree the lineup of that committee and for those members to discuss a remit, the sooner the better. Okay, so we're happy to agree those next steps on the basis of the discussion. Yep. Thank you very much. Thank you again to members of the Task and Finish group for your work.
We record that in the minutes, Chair.
Oh yes, definitely. Let's move on to, and thank you to Debbie and Patrick, you may leave.
Escape.
Agenda item 6, which is the work plan. Looking at page 39, we've got our next meeting is on the 2nd of March. Currently we have one agenda item, evaluation of the Business Decarbonisation Support Programme, which falls under the climate change remit of the committee. I have spoken briefly with Gary Taylor about whether the March meeting would be a good time to receive a update on York Central major project, because we've had reports on other major projects over the last 6 months in terms of Outer Ring Road, Station Gateway, Castle Gateway. So I'll pick that up with Gary. I think his initial suggestion was I'd need to talk to the partnership. So I'll try and figure out who we need to ask and who's best to ask in order to get a positive response. But because that is a project which obviously with which the council is involved, but it's not a council project. But there's obviously lots happening in terms of planning applications, bridges springing up. So there's a lot going on. Yes, James?
Thanks, Chair. Just to jump in, just on the back of the previous discussion around recommendation tracking, I wondered if something that you might be interested in for the March meeting with just that one item on the agenda would be we could bring something to give you some options for how we might look to track recommendations that are agreed by executive from task and finish groups or from the committee. We could give you some sort of suggested formats, perhaps.
So this would cover recommendations arising from all scrutiny discussions, or just task and finish groups?
I was thinking of something that would cover all of it in one.
Yeah.
If that was something you'd be keen to have there.
Yeah, no, it'd be useful to see have a look at the sort of proposed sort of method, so we can sort of provide any feedback that we want to. Okay. Looking at so page 39, we've got our list of potential briefing topics. Project management, we did receive a briefing at I think it was early December. We had the briefing Scrutiny members. It was healthy weight and project management. So we can tick that off. Customer services developments. I met up with Ailey Carricker and Ian Cunningham on the back of some questions that members had around telephone response times, the information that we receive. So Ailey and Ian had a few ideas in terms of issues that the committee might want to look at in terms of potential scope for more services to be made available via digital means. I think a lot of services can be accessed digitally, but there are still some, particularly in relation to waste services, that still can't. And if you want to access a service or get information, you have to bring up, if it's not available, information on the website. So that was one of the suggestions they had. There's a lot of talk about use of AI, not just in this authority, but other authorities as well. So there are some potential either briefing and or task and finish group in terms of in the customer services sort of sphere. But Councillor Eyre?
I was just going back to your one about how accessible things are online in terms of that. Can we include as part of that not just the availability of them online, but how easy they are to use? I use quite a few, and I find them absolutely. The council tax one, for example, is rubbish. Sorry. So it's very easy to pay a council tax on them, but it is a very difficult and laborious process, and that's for someone who I feel is relatively tech literate. So yes, it is available, but for some people, it would not be an accessible service for people to be able to use. Where if you pick the phone up and you don't understand what's going on, you can do things if you're clicking links and getting sent round and back and forward and back and things that people will not be able to use it.
Okay. Councillor Rose.
Yeah, no, the UI UX of the website itself, but also user journeys. This is tech speak, but for usage are pretty poor. Whenever I have to take a photo and report some broken glass, if you go through the council website and try and find it, it can be quite difficult, or it's buried within something that doesn't look like it's the right place. So we had a conversation with someone yesterday about whether a sign is a sign in certain contexts, and there's a lot we can do to make that much more inviting to average residents who don't need to know which team something's in to be able to report it, and accessing things like council tax and proper support services is obviously more important than that, but I think the whole of that space is worth looking into.
Yeah, I suppose there are two things in terms of usability of existing kind of online platforms and the potential for expansion of being able to do business or report things or ask for things digitally. I think it could form part of a task and finish group in terms of what works well, what could work better, what could be kind of expanded. Councillor Lomas?
Yeah, thank you. I think it really would be helpful to have a briefing, perhaps once the work is a little bit further underway, to understand how things are going to change, because there will be changes made to how people access things online, to, for example, make it easier to get to the right place to report something, or to get through the different layers in the right way. And that's really important in trying to make it easier for people to use online services to reduce that phone dependency. because what we want a really easy online option, so that people only need to phone up if they are not able to use an online service for a specific reason, but that the majority of people would be able to use the online options. We're quite aware we're quite limited through some of the big back office systems that the council uses, and it will take a bit of time to understand what the new systems that we're bringing in are going to be able to do and deliver. So I would suggest that a briefing, once we get a bit more understanding of that, would be really helpful. And then, you know, even a task and finish group to feed into how that works. But with so many of these things, we are limited by the bigger systems that sit in the back office and power the smaller systems that end users might see on the website.
So I'm happy to approach Ailey and ask if she'd like to do a briefing. I mean, the point I made in our discussion was if there are things it would be helpful for a task and finish group to do in terms of looking at the approach taken by the local authorities, or, you know, obviously a task and finish group can't fix or increase server capacity, or, you know, some of those other constraints. But if there are things that a task and finish group could do, but yeah, I like the idea of a briefing to understand what we've currently got, what work is in train, and what scope there is for other things to be done differently online, or for an expansion in the range of services that can be accessed. Councillor Widdowson.
Can I just make sure that we do take into account the learnings that we did by going digital on the car parking, on the residents parking, and people being able to get visitor parking and stuff, because the amount of noise that created, it'd be really useful to know where is the volume coming from, you know, how many people, which stream it is. And just looking over Nigel's shoulder just now at the council tax, to use your phrase of the visitor, the customer's journey.
Yeah.
It's like a... It's
okay,
like
well, that can be a case study in terms of...
But I'd really do some learnings from the car parking.
Yeah, and I know there have, I can't remember when it was, but there have been reports to Scrutiny about implementation of sort of digital res park, and yes, I'd say that wasn't a smooth journey by any stretch of the imagination. Okay, so I'll approach Ailey about and Ian about a briefing. That'll be helpful. Right, where are we? A couple of things that are still on our potential briefing list in terms of digital switchover, which we're kind of waiting for Roy Grant and colleagues to let us know when would be an opportune time to have that, to return to that discussion. And then task and finish groups, we've closed one of them. The task and finish groups around understanding potential impact of changes to long-term sickness and disability benefits has done some work, but it's a shifting picture in terms of having a sort of full understanding of what changes are going to come about, and that's still there's still some uncertainty around that, so that's kind of ongoing. Councillor Widdowson?
Can just bring us back to potential topics. You've got community woodland on there.
Yeah.
It'd be useful to have a briefing. I've walked around there quite a few times recently because of the time of year and stuff it is, and it'd be really interesting to understand what the next steps are inside of there and how it's being managed. It's a really minor point, but it's irritating. The Forestry England policy is not to have dog mess bins, which means when you're walking around, there are little packages everywhere. Right. So it's how are we doing that? How are we doing the parking? How are we doing the accessibility? How is it being taken forward? Because we've not heard anything for a couple of years now.
Yeah, which is why we wanted to have a briefing on it, so we can find out more. So we can try and prioritise that. So we talked about task and finish groups, and then on the very end page, possible task and finish groups, community infrastructure levy. Councillor Merritt and I had a discussion with officers week before last, so I think we can expect some work is being done on on how the SIL will operate, and I think there was a strong suggestion there would be a proposal that would come to scrutiny, not necessarily this committee, but potentially place for input prior to it being agreed. So that probably doesn't warrant a task and finish group, but we'll keep it there in case it doesn't appear. Procurement, I believe there's a paper going to executive next week agreeing a procurement strategy, I think. It's definitely on the forward plan, because I've definitely seen it. So obviously that hasn't come to scrutiny prior to going for decision. So I think there doesn't seem a lot of point doing a task and finish group on something that we won't be able to influence. So I suggest we take that off. Okay. Any other comments on the work plan? No. So there are item 7, urgent business. There is no urgent business. Thank you, members, and good night.